Hi friends, it's Lisa Hetrick, illustrator for Gina K Designs, and I'm so grateful you could join me today. I have a fun card tutorial project to share with you today, but with a little bit of a twist. I'm breaking down this tutorial into two parts because I'm sharing two different watercolor techniques and it's going to be super fun. So here is the inspiration for these next two cards. I created this painting last year. I shared this in the introduction video, and I really wanted to kind of take a deeper dive into recreating that watercolor painted look with some of those gold accents. So here are all of the supplies that I am going to be using in the next two tutorials. And all of the supplies and the details are listed below in the description for every single thing that I'm using in these two tutorials. All of the dyes, the watercolor, the stamps, the inks, all of the supplies. Everything will be listed below. I did pre-cut everything for this tutorial so that we could really focus on the techniques for the project. So I'm showing you everything that I'm using in the tutorial. The primary stamp set that I'm going to be using is the New Beginnings stamp set, my new stamp set with Gina K Designs. We're going to be focusing on the Leafery and using the Luna, the Whimsical Luna, and I've got all of these other fun Gina K Designs products here. Now, the watercolor tutorial is going to be focused on using two colors, a green and a yellow. We're going to use watercolor pencils, and we're also going to use some pan paints. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in to part one of this tutorial. Okay, so we are going to start with the card base, and I cut the card base out with the Master Layouts die using the Gina K Designs layering white cardstock. And to achieve that gold effect that I want to achieve, we're going to start with embossing the stars. And I'm using the Champagne embossing powder from Gina K Designs, and I have the embossing ink pad here, and I'm just going to go ahead and get that inked up nice and juicy. And for once, I remembered to bring out that anti-static bag and use it. I very rarely use it, but this time I remembered, so kind of fun. Okay, so I just stamped down that galaxy of stars onto my card base here, and I'm just going to go ahead and apply that champagne embossing powder to get this look and feel. So I'm achieving that gold look and feel from the original watercolor painting by doing some embossing. So I'm just going to go ahead and emboss those stars and, try not to burn my finger this time, which I seem to always do. But anyway, okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and move forward in stamping the Leafery. So I have Lucky Clover, and I'm just going to go ahead and ink up two of the leaf elements with the Lucky Clover. And then I've got my Tranquil Teal. I love this color combination. They're very bright and vibrant. And I'm just going to go ahead and stamp them all down at the same time on another piece of layering white cardstock here. Stamp them down, and I'm going to run them through my die cutter and get all of my wonderful little leafery pieces that we're going to use for embellishments for the final card. I pre-stamped and embossed the Luna moth on some Canson watercolor paper. And this is how we're going to achieve that gold look that I had in the painting, but we're going to do it with some embossing and some easy going watercolor techniques. Now, the technique that I'm going to focus on for this major part of the tutorial here is wet on dry watercolor. That means the brush is wet, the paper stays dry for the most part, and the only water that we're applying to the paper comes from the brush. So I'm loading up the brush with the pigment, and you can see I'm just using a green. Now grab any green from your watercolor stash. You can use any color. We're not getting really specific. We're just going to focus on the techniques here. Now, the embossing acts a little bit like a resist, but what makes this super easy going is that the Luna moth and the embossing have these channels now. So we're working in these little channels and areas where we can, on the wings, that we can work individually. Now, I loaded up all of that green watercolor towards the body of the Luna, towards the center, and just dropped it into the channels on the wings. And now you can see with a clean brush, I'm just pulling that pigment out to the outer edge. Now, don't worry if it goes outside the lines, because we're going to be die cutting this Luna moth out to use as the final embellishment on the card front. Now, when you're doing embossing, first of all, I wanted to do embossing because I wanted to create that gold and that striking contrast between the gold and the color. And then second, this technique is so super simple. If you're just getting started in watercolor, or you've been watercoloring for a really long time and you want to get that effect with your stamped projects, this wet on dry technique is so easygoing, and you get like this splash of watercolor that just, it brings all the joy, and I just absolutely love it. You can see that I just repeated the same technique on the right hand side, loaded up all that pigment towards the body of the Luna, right in the center part of the wings, and then just with a clean wet brush just pulled that color out to the outer edge. And I'm doing it again with the bottom part of the body of the Luna. And it makes it, this technique is so super simple. It helps give you a little bit more control over the watercolor. Sometimes people feel less confident working with watercolor because it goes where the water flows. And that's all you need to remember. Watercolor is just gets coaxed right into where the water is. But this technique keeps things pretty controlled. You're really just focusing on the brush being wet, the pigment is wet that's on the brush, but the paper is dry. So it's not really flowing all over the place. You're able to kind of also control it because we've done this embossing. So we have these channels, what I call channels, in the stamp that allow us to concentrate that watercolor in the center, and we can pull it out to the outer edges to create that look of the lights and the darks. And it's super, super simple. This is my favorite easygoing watercolor technique. I love all things watercolor, but you can see that this is just a really easy way to get a big bang of color. Now I'm adding a little bit of yellow to the tips and around the edges of the wings. And all I'm doing here, again, it's wet on dry. Now the Luna is a little bit wet because we've been painting it. So we're dropping just a little bit of yellow in there and letting those two colors mix. The colors in a Luna moth are just absolutely magical and stunning. I just love it. And it's a rare find to have one of the Luna moths kind of come down from the sky and see one in the summer. And when I was illustrating this stamp set last summer, that indeed happened. One came down and was on my front door, and I'm just so inspired by it and the colors. So I really got a chance to observe all the beautiful greens and translucent colors in the Luna moth. So love it. Just a little bit of geekery there, just a little bit of geeky like inspiration. Okay, so we're moving to the center of this Luna moth. And again, I'm repeating that technique. I loaded up that pigment pretty heavy at the top of the Luna moth body. And then I'm just, with my clean brush, I'm just dragging that pigment down. And I'm using the Canson watercolor paper. Normally I use 100% watercolor paper, but you can really do some very loose and wet on dry techniques with this paper. And this paper is easily, you can get this paper very, very easily. So that's why I wanted to share it today. And I love this look. I mean, it's just so, the contrast is just amazing. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and build out the card. So I'm just going to put a little bit of Gina K Designs Connect glue on the back of my card front here. And kind of sloppily, I just add a little bead of glue, adding it to my card base. Now, this is an A2 sized card base that I got a little wet here. And this color is the Gina K Designs Blue Lagoon cardstock. Love that color. I love all the blues in Gina K's line. So, and that little wet spot will dry, so no biggie. So I've added the card base now, and now after die cutting that Luna, look at her. She's so pretty. She's dry. You can see all that watercolor granulation in there, and you can also see the gold. So the gold embossing powder matched up with the gold galaxy of the star stamp just creates just a really, really easygoing card with a lot of texture and dimension. And again, the stamps are the star of the show. So I've added the Luna here, just put a couple little foam dots from Gina K on the back of it and just popped it on there. And you can see that that Luna is pretty large. It will cover the size of your A2 sized card. It will cover the whole card, which I love, so that you can add all these different layers. And again, so that the stamp is the star of the show. So I'm going to take these, I'm taking these Leafery elements and I'm just putting a little bead of glue on them and I'm nesting them up underneath the wings to again use the stamps as the embellishments and create a little bit of extra texture and dimension here. Loving this look. Super summery, super natural. The gold just adds a little bit of extra pop to the entire card without adding a whole lot of height. I'm just taking a little bit of the Emerald City sequins from Gina K, and I'm just going to pop 3 of them in here because they have this beautiful green gold look to them, and I think it's just a great companion to this whole look. Now look at that gold and look at that watercolor. So again, the inspiration was the painting, but translating it over into this card was just so much fun. So on the right was the inspiration where I just kind of straight up watercolored it, but adding that gold embossing really just gave it a little bit of an extra pop, and I just love it. So don't forget to download the free card idea sheet that I have. The link is below in the description. I've got 8 brand new ideas for you for this new beginnings stamp set with Gina K Designs. So you can download that for free, and the link is in the description. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the Luna Magic. Now, part 2 will be coming out next week. I'm super excited to share another watercolor technique with you. This time, we're going to focus on watercolor pencils to get a different kind of look and feel with our card. Thanks so much for watching. Please consider sharing the joy by liking this video and subscribing to this channel. And I'm sharing more card and watercolor tutorial videos for your inspiration right here. So come on in and take a peek at my tutorials. I have a lot to share, and I'll see you next time.